Hey, we get a lot of discussion on some of these Facebook pages and some of these websites. A lot of newbies getting into Jeeping that don't understand these cheap lift kits. You'll have to excuse me, I'm driving. I do have to look at the road occasionally. But there's a lot of discussion about these cheap lift kits and how high you can go with them. Recently saw a post, a guy lifted 4 inches and he is not using a slip yoke eliminator or a double cardan drive shaft. And you know, I still question how this is actually working. Typically, if you go above 3 inches, you need to have a slip yoke eliminator and a double cardan drive shaft. Now I know, but the fact is, that stock drive shaft in a TJ, from center of U joint to center of U joint, only measures 13¼ inches. And this is all about geometry. I'm going to break this down to you on a whiteboard, dealing in a triangle, to try to show that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. That when you lift a Jeep without the double cardan, there's only one place that it can move, and that is on your slip yoke, which is going to shift it to the back, and it's also going to increase the angle that the U-joints have to operate within. And you can actually go so high that your U-joint will no longer turn. The yoke and the drive shaft will bind on each other and will fully lock up. And I can tell you that that happens around 5 to 6 inches. But we're going to do a little whiteboard presentation. We're going to show exactly what takes place when you lift these too high with that short drive shaft. Now, these cheap lift kits, I view them as being pretty much for pavement posers, mall crawlers, parking lot princesses. Yeah, you can lift them that high, but don't take them off-road. If you get into full suspension drop with these, more than likely, your slip yoke is going to slip off of the output shaft on the transfer case, and you're going to have more damage than you know what to do with. Okay, so let's think about the geometry of this thing in the form of a triangle. That's going to be the easiest way to explain it so that it makes sense. Now, if you've got a Jeep TJ that's in stock configuration, this drive shaft representation is actually accurate. Their drive shaft from yoke to yoke, center of the U-joint to center of the U-joint, is 13¼ inches. So we're dead nuts on with that. Now, as you can see, that's a pretty short drive shaft. That's a pretty radical angle. None of this is represented to scale. This is strictly for illustration purposes. Now, these cheap budget lift kits, if you take and extend this center line of your axle down by 4 inches. We're going to do this in a different color so you can see what that does here. If you extend that line down 4 inches and you take your 13½ inches, now you've got a new axle center. It's going to be down here in this area. And just in case you haven't figured it out, the horizontal line at the top represents the axis of the slip yoke, or the output shaft of the transfer case. And what's going to happen when you take that, you are, 13¼ inches. What that's going to do is that's going to move your center line now. Watch this. It's going to bring it down here. And this becomes your new center line. And the vertical line on the far right represents the upward and downward travel of the axle shaft. Okay, so what you've done is you've essentially, and this is an accurate representation, you have moved your U-joint back by 2.5 inches. Now you only have so much slip yoke here. Okay, so that's probably going to stretch you out to where, if you didn't have that little rubber boot on it, where this used to sit up inside of the transfer case, now you're more than likely going to have splines exposed. And what that does, now what happens if you're in a situation where you come across an intersection at speed that's got a pretty good dip to it, and your axle droops as far as here. Now all of a sudden, you have gone from there to here. And you notice that this gets worse the farther you move it. All of a sudden, two things have happened. You are now striking the yoke with your drive shaft. And up here, you've moved to the point where you no longer have engagement with the output shaft on the slip joint. Your axle falls, pile drives into the ground, back of the Jeep flips up, yada, yada, yada. You're in a world of hurt. This is why I absolutely do not condone, nor do I recommend putting a 3-inch or 4-inch lift kit on a TJ without going to a double cardan drive shaft. My go-to guys are Tom Woods. I'm not endorsed by them, I'm not paid by them, but they're my go-to guys. They know exactly what they're doing, and I have never gotten a wrong drive shaft from them, and their turnaround time is like lightning. So the alternative, if you do elect to buy one of these spring lifts that advertises 3 inches, 4 inches, what I recommend you do is you go to Adams, Tom Woods, whoever. I'm not going to tell you who to buy from. I recommend Tom Woods, but what you do is you get a custom drive shaft. And you go, get rid of all this here. Get down to the nitty-gritty. Now this is going to go away. Because now your slip joint is no longer there. Your slip yoke, when you go to something like the JB Conversions Super Short Slip Yoke Eliminator, actually takes about 7 inches off of this distance right here. Now you're in a position something like this. We've got an output shaft that's very short, a flange, and that flange now attaches to a double cardan type U-joint. So essentially, and I'm not drawing this correctly, but you get the idea. Double cardan has 2 U-joints back to back, so it can turn a sharper angle. Now what you'll have is you will have a slip yoke essentially within the drive shaft. And notice just how close this new drive shaft angle comes to mimicking the factory angle. There are a lot of other things that I'm not talking about in this video on purpose, like the fact that you're going to need adjustable upper control arms for the back to rotate your pinion angle up. Now at this point, your double cardan joint becomes stationary. It no longer travels forward and backward with the up and down movement of the axle. Essentially, we've moved the slip yoke into the drive shaft. This has benefits. It makes for a lot longer slip yoke, allowing for more travel, and it allows you to run a lot higher lift. I'm actually running a total of 6 inches, 3 inches of body, 3 inches of suspension. Some of you guys out there will say the body lift doesn't count, but that's not true in our case because we lifted the engine and transmission another 3 inches to allow clearance for the panhard bar in the front so that it wouldn't make contact with the harmonic balancer. That is now stationary right here. This is your new center point. The drive shaft expands down here, allowing for much more mobility up and down without risking having the slip yoke fall out. And this is the lesson for today on drive shaft geometry. So to put it in these terms, this is your brain. This is your brain on meth and a 4-inch lift. And this is your brain on a lot of meth and a 4-inch lift. The moral of the story, don't do math. Peace out.